Hello and welcome to OzLoL Podcast episode 120. We're now in, well, I'm getting myself confused. And my name's Caster Comix. And I'm host, so we're in deep trouble because I don't know what's going on really. Anyway.
Are you having a stroke,
I think I'm having a stroke. Oh, no. That's Pixie. Also joined this week by...
If you're having a stroke, do it on your own time. Don't do it in front of the camera.
We don't need to see that shit.
So we got Victor, who's busy with
the return of the Victor Bradley.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We've got Smite.
Hey boys, how's it going? And girls?
And we have joining us all the way from Europe, which is apparently a place somewhere else in the world, which is in Australia. Why wouldn't you want to live here, though? We've got TBSkyen.
Once a jolly swag man camped by a billabong. Hello, guys.
Nice.
What?
A local reference that
Oh,
Kiwi
yeah,
friends won't understand. That's even better.
No, that was
the only
bullshit. He didn't say cunt once.
Welcome to an oceanic
Actually, the
broadcast.
sickest burn I've ever heard, and entirely true and warranted.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are part of the Trinity Force Network, and you can check us out at trinityforcenetwork.com. So go there to find all our previous shows and all the shows of our sister podcasts, including the episode that TBSkyen was on the Trinity Force podcast about 2 months ago, something like that. So if you find the discussion we're about to have with him interesting, you can go and find out more there as well. Let's talk about... Well, firstly, you normally get our guests to introduce a little bit about themselves. So, Skyen, why don't you tell us what your favourite champion is and what your favourite lane is?
Oh crap! Have we put you on the spot?
Making a joke. My favorite champion is Thresh, and my favorite lane is bot lane.
Yes.
Ooh.
Awesome.
Okay.
I noticed you didn't call it
Thresh
support.
skin. Favourite Thresh skin.
Oh, geez, that one's actually difficult. Blood Moon, I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Same here.
Thank
Same
you.
Here. Good choice. We're gonna keep you on. We're not gonna kick you off now. If you said Championship Thresh, you would have been.
Yep.
I'm sorry. It just would have been the end of it.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh wow,
that's
okay
the
then,
way it
sorry
works,
guys.
yeah.
I'm out of here then.
See you, Sky.
Whoa,
Right.
whoa.
And, well, I mean, basically, most people who are on the show probably know who you are. But for the, 4 people who play League of Legends who aren't on Reddit or don't look at the client, Skyen, why don't you tell us who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, but
I do the Caster Comix, which is, I think, the only esports themed webcomic in the world. I'm not entirely sure. Certainly the only League of Legends one, and I do comics about the various LCSs, the tournaments, and the shoutcasters, and the weird crap I imagine they get up to in their spare time. And if you're Australian, probably you have seen, if you ever go to ocae.lolesports.com, the OPL Rewind comics I've done, sort of recapping the standings and the games of the OCE scene.
Mm. Absolutely, yes. I mean, because I don't actually watch any of the LCSs. I don't watch any international stuff because I don't have the time to do it. So I actually find reading Caster Comix to be helpful to actually kind of understand what is going on. So it's actually kind of helpful in that regard. Yeah.
Hell,
yeah, I have the image of the LCS standings. It was like back in season 3 or something, and it had the NA LCS, and I still have the image of Cloud9 like literally on a cloud, just like leagues ahead of everyone else back in that season. That's just like forever ingrained in my head now, and like to me that's just the style of Caster Comix, like really great visualizations of what's happening in competitive league. It's always great.
Yeah, I try. I mean, it's seeing people do like recap comics where basically they just sort of, this guy beats that guy and then it's a punch, and this guy beats that guy and then it's a kick, and there's like people have done like stuff like I do, but I just feel like if I want to do more than one of these, I have to come up with different ways to show shit from time to time, because otherwise it's just like Garfield copy pasted every day.
Yeah.
Can I just say, the light behind you is really bright and you're a little bit blurry. Like, I feel like I'm coming out of a coma and you're my doctor.
That is what that's like.
I mean, more
That's exactly
likely
what it's
to be
like.
your crazy serial killer captor, but okay.
Whoa!
Actually,
I
just
feel like
mean,
if it
yeah,
was
this
a serial
is
killer
focused.
capture, the background wouldn't be quite so bright. Like I would like maybe a dank, dark basement, and by dank I don't mean 420. I mean like mildew.
You sound like you have a lot of experience with this, Pixie. So maybe we should.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know all about both kinds of dank basement.
Yeah. He's left
Both
many
kinds.
reviews on Yelp.
Yeah.
4 out of 10 would get captured again.
Real
oh,
basements
4 out of
of
20
New
would get
Zealand.
placed again.
Now, I guess for me, I mean, I noticed that in recent years, like, internet-based comics have become a real thing. Like, it's quite an extensive thing as well. Like, there's basically a sort of comic out there for everyone. I'm just curious, like, what is your inspiration? Like, what comics do you look at and go, that's incredible artwork, or that's incredible, like an incredible application of ideas? For
Oh
people who
my
might be
God,
interested in
started
finding
with-
more
Okay.
sort of...
I mean, in terms of web comics, it's kind of hard to get around Penny Arcade, I guess. Which, even if I don't always agree with, their bullshit, I really like the art of Penny Arcade and the evolution that's gone through. And like other stuff, like I've got this huge list of bookmarks that's just nothing but web comics that I follow, and there are so fucking many. Yeah, I wouldn't want to recap them all, but in terms of like comics people might have heard of, I've always been very fond of the Disney comics, especially a guy called Don Rosa, who did some very great Donald Duck comics for a very long time before he retired. And I've taken a lot of inspiration from him in terms of how I visualize things and how I do like expressions and compositions and stuff like that. And like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm not gonna rant for 10 hours about all the comics I like.
we could do a whole episode of
the
just you
longest
talking about
podcast
comics.
Yeah, I mean I should do that actually.
Yeah, you should. I mean, because it's yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that you see them everywhere, like especially on Twitter and on Reddit. Like they're really heavily shared, and so it's kind of, I guess, it's an interesting phenomena. I guess like it's just like the creativity of the internet. I mean, I guess like you see it in Tumblr and you see it in all sorts of different avenues. But I think webcomics kind of it takes a lot more effort than just doing a cool picture in DeviantArt. Like it's actually generally a lot more involved. And so like for me, I just find it fascinating to sort of see how it kind of works and what sort of drives people to do it.
I think to that vein, actually, Carrot, you raised something quite interesting there, because I think the notion of the format, not notion, the format of the comic really suits the internet as a whole. I mean, you mentioned Tumblr. Like one of the hallmarks of Tumblr early was the ability to have images that were tiled in a sequence one after the other. You know, the idea of a GIF set, and a comic is, a GIF set that doesn't move. But the difference between a comic and just a series of 6 images is a comic is a delivery of a story. So that's a medium that was just perfectly built for the delivery of the story. I think in that regard, it's no wonder that webcomics have become such a phenomenon, because they're easy to share. But along that kind of vein, I've got a question for you, Skyen. Because we see a lot of the quite popular humor-based web comics, and some of the more hard-hitting ones, the XKCDs, the Cyanide and Happiness, Hyperbole and a Half, a lot of them have since gone and published books that are anthologies of their work, plus, some never-before-seen comics. And also XKCD, funnily enough, just branched out and done some other books of, some of the more sciencey stuff they do, the explanation-type stuff that Randall tends to do on his private blog, or not private, his blog associated with the comic. Do you feel like there's space for that with Caster Comix, given that it is actually quite slaved to the esports scene?
Yeah, I don't think so, in terms of, like, maybe specifically the Shoutcaster comics, but the problem with Caster Comix is that they are topical. They are tied to the events of any given particular stretch of time within the esports scene. So it's like, the LCS recap comics, I'm very happy to go back and look at them and be reminded of what was the LCS like in season 3 based on my comics, but like they only really work in that context. And someone who came along in season 4, season 5, season 6,
Okay,
they
so
have no
the
context for
Caster
it.
Comix and the Rewind stuff, what you're saying is, Skyen, you are basically the Seinfeld of esports.
I never watched Seinfeld, so I don't get the reference, but I'm sure you're right.
Oh,
Wow. And what's the deal with those webcomics?
So
What's the deal with Baron throws?
that's a joke that would never get old. Like, that's
I don't get it.
I love that bad Jewish comedian shtick, by the way. Like, that's my favorite, because Seinfeld's the only one who's ever done it right, and I love it when other people try to do it, because they just tell non-jokes, but they do that, like, that Seinfeld Jew voice, like, I was waiting at the bus stop, and the bus drove straight past. Why do they call it a bus stop, but the bus doesn't even stop? And they just expect you to laugh. It's my fucking favorite thing. Like, it's so fucking bad.
Just to get back to the topic of esports, I mean, we're all involved in the OC scene. I guess you, in your work, you know, you're sort of an observer of NA and in EU, and I presume you sort of watch other regions as well. Like, how is it to watch the OPL? Because I guess, yeah, I mean, it's obviously not top tier, but I mean, you know, when you watch it, is it just like, oh my gosh, this is so scrub? Or, because I mean, like, if you read Twitch chat, it's very much like that, but that's because it's Twitch chat. But you know, what's your observation of the OPL and kind of the oceanic scene as an outsider?
DW.
Yeah, I mean, I would put the OPL like on the higher levels of at least like European Challenger Series in terms of like of the levels of play, because you have all the same concepts, split push and lane swaps and like and compositions that work in the same way. So it's not like there's a huge like knowledge gap, at least not that I can see. Between the scenes, it's more a thing of like how much time do they have with a coach, how much time do they have to scrim, how many teams can they scrim. Like I think it's more just like how Europe and North America is lagging behind Korea. Like a lot of it is infrastructure stuff. At least in my perspective, I don't get to watch as many OPL games as I would like, and I probably should. But yeah,
neither do we, and we actually do a podcast about it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
sorry,
we're not on the right client, though.
Yeah. Sorry, Victor, what did you say?
I was just going to say, because, like, Legacy is top of the pack now. Like, they were always a really good team, but they're now, like, just absolutely leagues above everyone else. And they're one of the main two that picked up a gaming house and now are spending more time practicing and playing the game and learning and everything.
Yes, but...
So it's...
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
It's definitely a fair response.
Yeah.
I wish someone would beat Legacy. I'm tired of drawing that branch joke.
No, I love it. I love it, and I can't wait for the grand finals when it's like Chiefs or Direwolves, and it's just the biggest branch that drops down. Not like I'm trying to give you ideas, but this is just what I'm seeing is going to happen. Because Legacy, they're not going to lose the game.
The thing is, like, the thing is, right, and every time I see that comic, all I can think is there has to be, like, a sweet as hell joke somewhere in there, right? Because Legacy, every team that has ever been dominant has always had reports of losing in scrims, right? Like, Cloud9 did it when they were dominant. Fnatic was doing it last season. Even SKT last season. All these teams have always lost in scrims. And Legacy do scrim, like, a considerable amount, right? And they probably lose some of those scrims. But it doesn't matter. We don't hear about that shit, right? Because if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it even make a sound?
You've been waiting to make that joke, haven't you? You've just been saving it up.
I've been sitting on that one since like 2 years ago, man.
You're just hoarding it under
Since they
your bed.
became Legacy and picked up that tree motif, I thought, but what about the scrims?
So you just you've had the joke on a bit of paper and you fold it. It's in your bedside drawer, and every so often you pick it out and read it and have a chuckle. And put it
I
back,
shelved it. It's actually stuck in my anus so that I can't lose it.
If a tree's
a suppository
level, they're a score.
Yeah, a suppository joke. That's where I keep my best ones.
I mean, there was.
Up your
Sorry,
arse.
Go.
there was that 1 week where it was Direwolves against Legacy. They didn't get a tree branch dropped on them. They got picked up by the tree. I was wondering, is that like showing that Legacy see them as more of a threat, or was it just a really good opportunity?
Fucking branch joke.
Yeah.
Basically, that was all it was. I didn't want to draw the damn branch joke.
Yeah, to kind of relate to Skyen here, like, I can tell you empirically as a writer, a lot of the arts is fucking boredom, right? A lot of creating something different and interesting. There is no meaning behind it. It is just boredom, right?
Yeah.
I'm working on a film right now that has like a whole bunch of very specific objects on a beach towel, and my collaborator said, so what's the meaning behind all these objects? And I thought, I don't know, they just look kind of cool. But what I told him was a very specific, like, full-on essay bullshit breakdown of what all these items were, right? The arts as a whole are boredom and bullshit. There is no meaning. Just enjoy the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, art is
that's
what
what I
you can
did.
get away with.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah.
I mean, the
like-
week it
like
came
porn,
out,
right? It's like porn. When you watch porn, you're not sitting there going, but what's her family life like, right? You're just jacking off. You are just enjoying the thing.
Okay, let's move on because this discussion's got very weird all of a sudden.
Pixie, we already understood Pixie. Why are you going to bring up jacking off? We're talking about League of
Okay,
Legends.
let's talk about the OPL in the last week. So we obviously we went on last week, so we didn't have a chance to discuss it. I do believe Pixie did an update, which I'm yet to actually upload. It will get uploaded either with this video or with this track or a previous one. So check that out. Let's talk about the previous week. We'll talk about the overall standing since it's been 2 weeks since we've actually met. So we've had Legacy is on 8-0, Direwolves, Sin, Chiefs on 5-3, Hellions and Avant 3-5, Infernum is 2-6, and Trident is 1-7. And in the last week we had Chiefs versus Trident. Chiefs win 2-1. Sin versus Infernum. Sin wins 2-0. Legacy versus Hellions. Legacy wins 2-0, unsurprisingly. And Direwolves versus AV win 1. So AV wins 2-1. So last week in OPL, what are people's thoughts?
Oh man,
Sin baby, Fighto, they're coming up.
See, the one I kind of want to pick on here, actually the two I want to pick on are Hellions and Trident, because the series with Hellions was 2-0, right? But the first game was not at all representative of that narrative. Like, it was a way closer the game than a 2-0 would suggest. Oh yeah, the second game was a fucking landslide. But it's more eminent in Trident, who took a game off Chiefs, and I think every single game they've played since their win, they've taken a game off and had one that was really close, sometimes two that were really close. Like, the bottom teams feel like they're on the fucking cusp. They're still really exciting series to watch. Like, I sit down for Chiefs versus Trident, and I'm like, you know what? There is a chance that Trident could pull this one out. And I feel the same way when Hellions play, whoever the hell they play, right? And then Sin are a team that has gone just beyond that cusp. And they're actually breaking into the top 4. And that has kind of made these other games more exciting for me as well, because I feel like any week now we're going to see the next runaway team, and we're going to see a team like Chiefs or Direwolves or whoever is in the top 4 start to fall further as these teams that are consistent but can't close out suddenly start being able to close out.
That said, it's a little bit rest in peace for some teams.
Trident.
Trident,
Rest in pepperonis. Trident enjoy playing against the challenger teams.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we've only got 2 weeks to go, so pretty much the top 4 is locked in. Unless something truly horrible happens for another team.
Well, I mean, Hellions and Avant can move in if they get some good games. I'd have to look at the schedule closely to see if that's possible, but pretty sure it is. So
Yeah, I'm
it is still
definitely-
kind of exciting for top 4.
Yeah.
But I mean, really,
Yeah.
realistically, they've only got 2 games. They'd need to win both games, and then it would have had to have beat one of the other teams needs to lose 2 games, and there has to be a situation where they have previously beaten them. So, basically, Hellions would have need to have beaten either Direwolves, Sin, or Direwolves Legacy. Direwolves, Sin, and Chiefs. Speaking about that stroke, and hope that Hellions had previously beaten them. And I can't remember who Hellions actually beaten. So
Probably Trident like 5 times.
Yeah.
I think Hellions mostly been beating like the lower tier teams.
Yeah.
Over the course of the OPL.
Yeah.
And it is weird.
It's interesting.
I have that thought about Hellions that it's like every once in a while it just looks like, holy shit, this is a good team. And then the next game follows and it's just like, what is lane? And they fall down. And it's such a... With Hellions, I feel like there's such a wide gap between when they're good and when they just don't seem to be able to play the game at all. And I kind of wonder what that comes from.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
it's the reason
they are
I've
the-
kind of... You go.
All right, I'll go. They're the only other team that's also got a gaming house, so it could be just an entirely new environment where maybe you're having a day where you're not really getting along with your teammates, and well, you can't really do anything about it because you're in the same house. You've got to get along with them. I mean, I'm not saying that is the case, but it could contribute to having games where you're going really, really well, or games where, like you said, what is lane?
And that's it's interesting kind of looking into the backdrop of that. But the thing I kind of pick from that is that's exactly why I kind of focus on Trident, and it seems really dumb too because they're like the bottom team. But taking into consideration, a lot of those losses were with I'm going to be totally blunt here, the worst mid laner in the OPL. It was with him, and he restricted their draft. He restricted so many of the peripheral parts of actually playing a game, let alone a best of 3, right? They suddenly look a lot better now, and like I said, they're constantly taking games off top teams. Like they seem more on the cusp than Hellions, and it's because I think when Hellions play great, they look like an amazing team, but then they also crumble and fall really hard. And to my mind, Trident don't do that, at least not as bad as they used to. They actually still put up a good fight, generally speaking. And when they take wins, it's like two very even teams duking it out, and one just barely overcomes the other. Like the game they took off, who was it? It was something like Direwolves, and I think that was actually the one game that they won. And there was the lane swap that happened, and Trident just countered it so gorgeously. It was like, this was, the worst team in the league, worst in terms of standings, pulling out the perfect counter strategy that nobody else had really thought to do nor executed properly up until that point. And that's actually what they are as a team capable of. And like I said, they're always on that cusp. I feel like in our ideal season, Hellions would be probably the bottom team because they lack that consistency. And in a best of 3, I've ragged on this every week. Consistency is so key in a best of 3.
Basically Trident the motto of this podcast.
Are a team that, Trident 3 weeks ago would have broken that cusp if they'd had their current mid laner instead of Beamer, and would probably be brushing that top form. If not, they would be where teams like Avant are right now, where they'd be consistently crushing the teams below them and sometimes taking one off the Sins and the Chiefs of the world.
So going into the final week, AV, they're playing Infernum this week, and then the following they're playing Legacy, and Hellions this week are playing Sin, and the following week they play Direwolves. So really neither team has got an easy path. Interestingly enough, Chiefs are probably the most... If by some miracle, like Hellions pulls off 2 wins or AV pulls off 2 wins, Chiefs are probably the most likely to fall down because they're playing Sin this week. Legacy this week, and then Sin in the final week. So potentially, they might go to 5th place, which would just be astounding.
Realistically, I don't see them holding equal second with Sin and Direwolves because their
Certainly
next
not.
matchups are going to be too hard for them.
Well, and the Chiefs right now are not as good as Sin Gaming, and I think that quite honestly. And then their other matches, Legacy, like that's not even a conversation really. If they do pull one out against Legacy, though, they'll win the one against Sin because it'll be the Chiefs have found their groove again.
Yep.
They're not in that groove right now, and I don't think they have the time to get back into it for playoffs.
Now, I haven't had my finger on the pulse this week because I've been buried in uni work, but I heard that Swiffer is back.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to bring up. Swiffer's back, baby. Are we going to see the Chiefs come back?
Yeah, because I mean,
No.
Swiffer... I wouldn't be so sure.
I think they might actually.
Maybe. A huge linchpin. Like him and Spooks, like they are the guys that make Chiefs as potent as they are. I mean, Radier is a genius. Ejim is amazing. Swiper is amazing, but like that combination of Spooks and Swiffer is such a key part of Chiefs. And I think once
throwback to like our first podcast of the season, we're predicting everything with saying like, I wonder if Chiefs are going to do well. Well, if they don't, probably going to be because they don't have Swiffer anymore. With Swiffer back and ideally with enough practice, then that should be all the reasons we thought they weren't doing very well gone, and they should be coming back. But I see that Pixie might have another point to make.
Now that's exactly the thing, because I was thinking exactly that same thing, right? And you said it right there. If they have enough time to practice, they probably haven't, because all these other teams have now had a full season of playing best of 3s to learn to shot call. the Chiefs just do not have that same level of time.
Except
just,
that
the thing is, like these, they have shockled together a lot before. Like they do certainly
for like
have that.
3 whole years.
But Chiefs have always been a team that have then also struggled in best of threes and best of fives. We've seen that when they've gone to wild cards. Let's get real. In previous years, until the upset happened with Avant taking the finals off them, and the fact that they lost that finals kind of evidences this, right? There weren't actually other OPL teams that could hold a candle to them. They didn't need to be amazing at best of 3 series. They just needed to continue being Chiefs. And then they suddenly hit the international stage. They started to struggle and fall flat. Even back then, that 5-man Chief squad could not stand up to the other top 4 teams in the OPL right now. I don't think bringing Swiffer back is going to be this dynamite thing anymore. I think it's going to be a better Chiefs lineup, but I still don't think it's going to be as good as Legacy and Direwolves. They might be able to knock Sin just because Sin are still upstart. They're on the upswing. There is still room for them to fail and room for them to learn and grow, but I don't see them ever holding a candle to Legacy until next split.
You don't think restoring like an old team dynamic that was successful will also restore some like coherence to their calls and to their plays?
I don't think so, just because every other team has had to adapt to the change in format. And I think the change in format has been a lot more significant than maybe Chiefs have appreciated, because they do seem to be the team that has been shaken the most by it. And like I said, it's actually an area where historically they have been their weakest, because they've been a great team and a dominant team, but they've still lost best of threes that we feel like otherwise they shouldn't have, just because they're bad at best of threes. I don't think that's unfixable. I think that's how things are, and I think bringing back Swiffer without a full split to practice best of threes with Swiffer is going to change where they are right now. They'll be a little bit better, but I don't think they'll be good enough. I think that the improvements the other teams have made are significant enough to outdo the improvement of bringing back Swiffer.
I think you're being way harsher on their record than is actually merited. So firstly, Legacy sucked at wildcards as well. Like no one, like Legacy had...
Oh shit, yeah.
You know, like they had... Well, basically, I think there was... what was the team? Dark Passage from Turkey, I think they were the team that Legacy were playing against, or...
They were against Turkey and Russian Force. Russian Force got stomped, and they beat their first game against Turkey, and then they lost every game afterwards against Turkey.
Yeah.
And so...
They didn't have their real team, though. They were like entirely a team of subs that year.
Yeah, the Russian one, yeah.
I just remember like seeing the camera on one of the guys' faces, and... it just showed his score as like 0-17-2 over 2 games or something. And the guy looked devastated. He was just sitting there with the most upset looking face on the camera. And I'm just thinking, like, imagine being in that position. You've flown across the world to represent your country. Like, oh my god, I was a sub before, but now I get to go on the main stage. And then you're just sitting there after 2 games like, I have embarrassed the fuck out of myself.
Yeah.
I look horrible.
So,
yeah.
By
so
one chance.
Really quick, Carrot, if I can,
right,
because
I
get the point you're making, but to nip it in the bud, right? Legacy at that time were also bad at best ofs. All the OPL teams were bad at best of 3, best of 5 series, right? The difference is the Legacy squad now has had that full split of playing best ofs, and they're fucking 8-0.
Okay,
right? And Sin have got good at it. They're on the upswing. Direwolves have got good at it. They're on the upswing. And they've had a whole split of playing with pretty much the same roster. Like, they've had all that practice, and the Chiefs just haven't. Maybe they will surprise us, but I actually don't think it's going to be as big a change as it would have been if Swiffer had a comeback in week 2.
If you actually let me finish my point, Caddyshack. Okay, so everybody sucks at wildcards. Secondly, the only times Chiefs have done badly in best ofs is finals, and that's twice out of 6 finals, I think, 5 finals.
But those are the only best ofs we used to play.
Yeah, so basically 3 out of 5 times they've won, and they've won every quarterfinals they've been in.
Yeah, okay, so they got to
Pixie,
you know,
Pixie,
they got to
bite your pillow for a second, Pixie. Pixie, you need to bite your pillow for a second, because Carrot's trying to talk and you're not letting him.
So, I mean, that's not to say that Chiefs are going to do well, but that's just to say that, like, you know, really their past record is not that bad. They've lost 2 finals. So it was against Legacy when the Legacy went to wildcards, and then the following winter finals or like spring finals when Direwolves beat them and they become the Oceanic champions. Not last year, the year before. So really, they're the only series in like 4 years in best ofs that they've lost. Every other best of they have won, and usually comprehensively. Usually they stomp the shite out of whoever's they're playing in the semis. And that was with Swiffer, and they've been together. I mean, basically this lineup's been together. Okay, Ejim, Rosie swapped out for Ejim, but I mean, Ejim was a top-notch support before anyway. I mean that's why Legacy, previous Legacy squad were really quite good, and Ejim was a big part of that. So, really, like, this squad has been together for 4 years, and their record's actually not as bad as you're making it sound. So I think it's actually not just, Swiffer's going to make hardly any difference. I think it might not make any difference because of the lack of practice, and Swiffer's been away in Europe for however many months or whatever. So, I'm not saying it's a guaranteed lock to see a Chiefs Legacy finals, though presumably Legacy and Chiefs will see each other in the semis. But I still think Chiefs you shouldn't write them off. I think they've still got a good chance to win the finals. Let alone make it to it.
Two really, really, really quick points before we move off Chiefs, because I imagine we're going to be doing that soon. One is that if you've been following their social media at all, you'll notice that they have very recently done their Red Bull boot camp training, which I imagine started when Swiffer got back. So on the notion of have they had enough practice with Swiffer? The answer is yes, because, maybe if it's enough, but have they had a lot? Yes, because the Red Bull boot camp, they're taking it really seriously. I saw a photo. There were 5 computers in one room and a laptop, and they're going to be practicing. Yeah, I know.
Seen that before.
They're going to be practicing a lot. I mean, essentially the gaming house environment for a few days, I imagine, leading up into maybe including this week of OPL. And the other second point is, if you've watched the recent Chiefs games, you'll notice that a lot of their mistakes come from shots that they have called. For example, in the Trident matches, basically every time Chiefs started falling behind was when they were like, let's go for this objective, or let's go for this kill, or let's go for this dive, and they just really didn't have to. I mean, I think I heard Atlas say it several times. Well, the Chiefs just didn't really need to do that, did they? They could have just kept winning.
Yep.
And that just comes down to shot calling. So obviously, if they can change that part of the game, then they'd be much closer to the top. And that's the thing that will change with Swiffer. Whether it will or not, we're going to find out, but that's the key thing that everyone's talking about. All the shot calling.
One thing I want to say as well is the laner they had before Swiffer come back, it was Cheese, wasn't it? IQD Cheese.
Yeah, Cheese, yeah.
He was, I want to say, Cheese, you're a great player and everything, and I think you're a cool guy, whatever, but he can be a real pain in the ass to work with. Cheese historically is someone who is a real pain in the ass to work with. Sometimes won't listen to his coaches or anyone or other players, and
so
can
he's Australian.
Sure, yeah.
You're describing an Australian, yeah.
What I'm saying is, Cheese has a history of being a real pain in the ass to work with, and a lot of their lack of development, I could cite back to Cheese. Sorry, Cheese, you're a great player. I've seen your Swain plays. They're very scary.
I like how you're talking as though he's going to be watching this.
He's going to come beat me up. I'm scared. He's going to torment all of my league games now. He's just going to come in and wreck my shit with Swain or something.
Yeah,
see, that's a good thing. We can shit talk them over in New Zealand. They can't come beat us up. We just got to worry about Pac-Man.
Yeah. So anyway,
any final thoughts about
I think Swiffer. I think Swiffer can be a big boost to morale and also be a nice driving force to push the team to get better, which I don't think she's brought to the team. That's what I want to say.
Any final thoughts on this week's games before we move on to talk about the upcoming games?
You all make very good points, but I hate Chiefs.
Okay. I think it's going to be really funny to see the tank drive over the tree.
Yeah. Well, that's it. So the big,
I'll take it. I just don't want to draw it anymore. That fucking branch choke.
Maybe you could do like a whole Avatar style comic if Chiefs beat Legacy.
I'm just imagining the branch falling down and just bouncing off the tank looking up and just blowing at the smithereens.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
You can pay me. You can pay me later. Just...
I feel like you could have just as easily
OPL money.
Yeah.
You could have just as easily drawn them as a Subaru Legacy, and no one would have batted an eyelid. Because then you could at least have the games between Legacy and Chiefs be a drag race between a boy racer car and a tank. Come on.
Unfortunately, I can't put other brands
Yeah.
in the OPL.
Now,
There's
Sky,
this thing called
I'm just going to
copyright.
point this out to you.
I'm
I'm
not
not sure you
care,
actually
but I'm pretty sure
noticed this.
Subaru might have objections if I
Yeah,
show
yeah.
one of their products being crushed by a tank.
Anyway, I'm not sure you've noticed this, Skyam, but if you actually take a very close look at the Chiefs logo right here, it actually looks like the face of a spider. So if you ever get sick of drawing tanks, you can start drawing spiders. For
No
the
one
Chiefs.
gets sick of drawing tanks.
What the fuck does
Yeah.
spiders look like in Australia?
you see
Usually
those-
you don't see them and then you're dead. So yeah, we don't.
Blue
we
and,
don't really
blue
know
and
what they're
chrome,
like.
apparently.
Yeah.
See, the blue bit looks like its face, and then the white bits under the blue are like the fangs. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So
That will
You
be a
just
stretch.
don't have as much of an imaginative mind as me. I think I should be writing these comics.
I've got a better
Translation
visual
did just make
design than you. How the hell does Chiefs work with a spider? Chiefs work with a general or like a tank commander of some description. It doesn't work with a fucking spider.
You're drawing in a chef's hat or
I
something.
think you've
I
been
don't
practically
like-
begging
I
for
know.
a cartoon off this week. So I think you should go and do the OPL Rewind, and then Victor should try to show up and do a better job, and then when he doesn't, we will make fun of him in this podcast.
We're gonna have a
So,
spider having a drag
Yeah,
race against a
yeah.
Subaru.
it better be in MS Paint as well, Victor, because that's how you do it, classy. All right. Any final thoughts
Okay,
about
start.
this week's games? Because we could talk about Aurelion Sol, which is such a great name.
Ooh.
Yes, we can. Aurelion Sol, who I realized was called Sun, happens to be the Star Forger. So fuck yeah!
Okay, so
With stars, not the sun.
Just real
Dingus.
quickly,
yeah,
this is in
Slightly
reference to
failed
last
science.
week when we talked about level 30 accounts. Riot actually in the latest patch have reduced the amount of XP required to get to level 30. So I think that's a cool little bounce off from last week.
so
Yep,
only
I
take
think it's
me
good
a
and
month and a
also-
half on 300 ping to get myself an NA account that I can play with the T-Force guys with. Yes.
It also undercuts a lot of our discussion as well. It's like, it's so hard to get to level 30. And now, well, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Now people are going to get to level 30 and be like, well, I've got 200 IP. How am I going to afford all these tier 3 runes? Which is
The other
it
thing,
was
like,
one
people
of the
brought up in the post is like, it's like, well, yeah, great, but now it's just you're going to be level 30. You're going to be matched with people who expect you to know what you're doing, and you're going to have no
Fucking-
runes whatsoever.
Oh, poor Riot. They can't fucking win, eh? They just...
No.
honestly, like,
really
I
can't.
think they should take the Heroes of the Storm approach, where you level up
game
your
isn't
accounts.
very good.
and-
Yeah, I agree.
Hey man, I enjoy it, but as you level up your accounts, you get like bonuses along the way. Obviously, you still earn your gold, which is the IP of the game, per game, but you also get little bonuses along the way. I mean, that's sort of the case. I think when you hit level 5, you get an IP boost on LoL, but that's about it. Maybe you could get like big chunks of IP, or maybe like at level 10 and 20 and 30 you get a free champion or something like that, or I don't know, just something to make the leveling not so boring, because you get absolutely nothing all
Yeah, I
the
mean,
way
it's
up until
the
30.
case
Hey,
of
man.
Riot again being tied to like old legacy technology. It's like the level 30 leveling system made perfect sense in beta, and it made good sense in like seasons 1 and 2 maybe. But now we're heading into season 5 as 6, and there's too many champions, there are too many runes, there's too many shit you need to buy with your IP, and there's just like a leveling system like the one they have doesn't work in the current ecosystem of it. So they just
But-
need to figure out something else to do.
Yeah, but I
Look,
see
if you
changes
ask
on the
me-
horizon.
if
Like,
you
I'm
ask
gonna be
me-
honest, I'm gonna be honest. In the last year or two, Riot has actually made every change people were hoping and expecting they would make. You know, we bitched
Except
about
for Blitz.
client, they updated the client. We bitched about chat, they updated chat. Bitched about queue, update. Like, we bitched about a lot of things, and Riot has actually kind of worked on all of it. You know.
How much do we have to bitch to
Sometimes-
get a replay system then?
No, but
Well,
like,
I think
sometimes
people
they
bitch
don't
out
do
about
it-
that an awful lot. I don't think there's any shortage of that.
Sometimes it doesn't happen when people think it should, but they also don't know what goes on at the back end of Riot. They don't act. Let's get real. No one aside from Riot knows what's happening at Riot, and even the average person who does code might not have a full appreciation of the complexity of what is going on at Riot. So bitching about stuff that isn't there yet feels kind of moot to me, because I have yet to find that Riot haven't done the thing that people have bitched about. The only exceptions to that are Sandbox and Replays. Replays, I don't know what's going on. Sandbox, there are good arguments against it. Book closed.
Okay,
see you later.
Pixie, I think you need to shut your mouth, and you should be shot with a ball of your own shit, because that is the most boring approach and most boring opinion I've ever heard. And Matt Smite, you should also be shot with a ball of your own shit, because you don't get nothing for leveling. You get 1 mastery point. 1 mastery point every time you level. Let's talk about the Sun Champion.
I have never been accused of being boring. Wow.
All right, let's talk about Aurelion Sol, since that's what we were going to talk about. So brand new champion. Actually, that was what I was going to say. In the new patch, they're bringing out clubs. We're going to put together an OzLoL club as soon as we're allowed. In fact, I might even email them to see if we can get it on the ground floor, like even before it's released, so we can make sure when it arrives in the client, you'll be able to join an OzLoL club. All 5 listeners that we have. Aurelion Sol. So, he is a dragon champion. He is the sort of final incarnation of the Aoshin concept. He's the Star Forger. Before we talk about sort of the specific of the kits, what is everybody's kind of initial impression? Like, when you saw it, what did you feel? We'll go with Skyen first. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was, whoa, power creep, because you've got a dragon who's literally the size of a planet, and it's like, oh, this seems fair.
Lore power creep.
I mean, I'm gonna brag a little bit right now and say I saw it before everybody else, because I did work on those memes that Riot put together for the European boards to work it out, and when I looked at him and I saw, like, they didn't tell me any details of his kit really, outside of he makes stars and things blow up. So I was looking at him like, it's like, the hell is this guy and what does he do? I was trying to figure out how to draw him and what the hell, like, he's actually very different from a lot of what Riot has been doing so far, at least visually. He's a very distinct kind of creature, because you'd think he was a spirit, maybe like Kindred. He seems to use some of the same technology in his animations as they used for Wolf, but even then, like, he's so cosmic, he's so, like, this is off-planet space sci-fi kind of stuff that in some ways he feels kind of out of place in League.
It's so weird as well. I mean, I've only read his short bio because I haven't had time to read the extended one, but it's like they describe him as literally a god. Like, he forges stars and is just miles ahead of the power of any other champion in League by far. And then
Ascended.
Yeah, but then in his bio it says, but some guys in space enslaved him and make him do stuff now, and so he's coming to League to feel better or something. And
Okay, so
I'm just thinking, who's enslaving this god?
the Targonians. The Targonians. Who the Targonians
The grim darkness of the future.
also-
There is only solo queue.
who also have people who are the avatars of things like the sun and the moon and abstract concepts like war. Like, they are certainly powerful. I mean, they're never going to enslave something like Aurelion Sol without tricking him, but hey presto, they tricked him, and that's where we are now. I mean, you can argue the same thing, I'll be honest, about a lot of different stuff, like how do you even capture and contain something like one of the old gods from World of Warcraft? How did the Necrons ever manage to capture and contain any of the gods that they deal with, and all that jazz, right? But the lore gives us a reason, and I'm going to accept that reason, because if I tried to pick it apart, I wouldn't enjoy half of the media I consume.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Aurelion's lore. It's the thing is he became amused with humans, or whatever civilization Targon was at the time. He came down and he started sharing like cosmic secrets with them, and eventually they used what he told them to create some sort of, it's the crown thing he wears on his head. Create that crown. It mind controls him. Anytime he does something they don't like, they can force him to kill one of his stars. That hurts a lot. And like, as reasons for a god to serve man goes, it's not the worst concept I've ever come across.
Okay.
I mean, his entire purpose is to make stars.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got interrupted because my microphone volume keeps turning itself up. So if I'm really loud, it's really bad. But I mean, I'm totally cool with like the concept of like an outsized, like a bigger presence in the lore than the actual game might represent. Like, I think that's, I don't know, it's something. interesting because it allows you to kind of do all sorts of crazy stuff without necessarily compromising the game. And I think, I mean, maybe it's my Warhammer fan speaking, but I kind of like outsized crazy lore. Like, I kind of like the notion that you've kind of got all this really big picture stuff that you can kind of enjoy, really bombastic, kind of over the top even. And I think it's kind of cool that we're sort of seeing another aspect of kind of the overall kind of cosmology of the League of Legends world. Like we've got the Void. I mean, that's kind of there. We've never really seen much about it. We just know that these creatures come out of it. But there's not really much else to the world outside of just just the continent. So it's kind of cool to have another being that's kind of outside of the immediate kind of Runeterra continent. Just to get another better idea of kind of how big this vision they have for the world that they've created.
I think one of the coolest things about Aurelion Sol is exactly that, the fact that it is a true window into it, because the last cosmic kind of champion we've really had has been Bard, and we have no idea how powerful Bard might be, or whether indeed he's powerful at all, and whether he's just like a regular mook from his race, and maybe how powerful the rest of his race might be. Like, Bard, we know fuck all, and it's really cool to get such a detailed window with Aurelion Sol. Like, we didn't just get Aurelion Sol's backstory, like, we got the backstory of a lot of the universe and who made it. Yep. That's really cool. That's like a bigger window than I think we've got with any other champion and any other kind of lore in terms of just the sheer creation mythos around Runeterra and the universe it exists in. I think the closest thing we've had to that has been Kindred, who is essentially death. And even then, that's a very big window into a very specific thing.
So
Riot seems to have sort of... Go, yeah.
No, you have the final word on this, and then we'll move on to like the kit and the rest of the most specifics of the champion. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Riot sort of seems to be on a path that they've been on for a while now, where they're sort of, again, just like the client is built on old tech that doesn't really work anymore, they're sort of rejiggering their lore and their entire universe. Ever since they took away the Summoners Institute and the Institute of War and Summoners and all that, they've sort of been on a path of, we need to build something that actually works in a modern League of Legends context, and they're sort of in a process of retconning a lot of the older champions, especially, into something that works more. And Aurelion is part of that. And also, I suspect the Taric rework will be the next thing in the Targon thing, as presumably. And I think he also is going to be sort of something that sort of gives retrospective perspective on what the hell is Pantheon supposed to be if he's not just a Spartan. Oh, he's an aspect of war now, and that's a cosmic Targon thing from the spacefaring super civilization. So it's like, so there is this, so it is part of this larger process I think Riot are trying to go through to make a more modern game.
And I think the best part about all that is, as all the other characters get more and more powerful and Jax's lore fails to be retconned, he becomes inherently more powerful because he's just a regular dude who is really good at fighting.
We don't have time to have this discussion, but I always hated it when people were like, who's the strongest champion in the lore, lore-wise, not on the Summoner's Rift, and everyone says, oh, it's Jax, his lore says he just beats everyone up. That's not how his lore worked.
It's like,
you're right.
Shogath is like
Let's
the harbinger of the apocalypse.
Shut up.
Yep.
Let's talk about the kit. So Aurelion Sol, he's a mage. His passive is he has 3 orbs that continue to orbit around him. Enemies that hit by these orbs take damage, and it's affected a little bit by crowd control. His Q is he shoots out a star. That it's kind of looks a lot like Anivia's kind of stun ball. I don't know, her frost ball or whatever you call it, where it sort of slowly kind of
Flash Frost.
Flash Frost. But he can actually follow along it, and as he follows along it, it gets bigger and eventually does more damage. He has his W affects. He's got essentially affects his passive and increases the amount of damage and does a larger orbit. It also allows him to travel in its active form an incredibly long distance, and he kind of serenely floats across the battlefield. What do I say? That's his E. His W is his passive, his E is the flying, and then his R is he does a line kind of damage, and it does a bit of CC. And So what do people think about his kit? What are the good parts? What are the interesting parts? What are you looking forward to sort of seeing in action?
Okay, so the thing you really
hankering
glossed over on his
for this.
Q. There's a thing you really glossed over on his Q in that it has basically it has theoretical infinite range. Because as long as Aurelion stays close to the orb or within its little explosion radius, then it will just keep traveling. Like, he keeps it alive by standing near it. He also gets a movement speed bonus when he activates it, similar to Ari when she throws her orb out. He can follow it all the way down until it pops out of the range, and then it's too far away from him, it'll explode. He can cast this before he casts his E, which passively gives him movement speed, and actively makes him soar over the map, over the top of terrain, for an incredibly long distance. He can go roughly around the distance from Baron Pit down to Dragon, probably a bit longer at max rank. He can travel that whole way, fire a Q, and follow the Q probably from bot lane to top lane if he wanted to, and snipe someone.
The thing is, like, it only...
There's interesting interplay. Actually, the thing I noticed the most about his kit is how thematically cool it is in some slightly more subtle ways. Like, the first thing I noticed when I watched the passive is I was like, wow, this is literally like planets orbiting a star. This is really, really cool. And then, he's the Star Forger, and his Q is he makes a star and nurses it to greater power. Everything about his kit actually felt thematically really cool until his ultimate, but it's still, a cool ability. The other thing I noticed about him...
weak. It's a little weak, like, visually, I think, because the ultimate is just like, blah.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the coolest thing a Star Forger could do.
Yeah.
But I see him as kind of a unique mage in a lot of ways, in that he's not just here's the abilities and each one does damage in a slightly different way. Like, I think Vel'Koz is the extreme of an average mage. He has 4 abilities and they do damage, and each one is slightly different. His Aurelion Sol is the opposite end of that. For one part, a lot of his damage comes from his passive. We have seen that before in the likes of Diana, but Aurelion Sol deploys it very uniquely and in a way that, fingers crossed, I think we could see in the jungle. Because he can kite buffs very effectively, and by tempering their aggro, he can just constantly stay out of their range while buffeting them with his orbs and dealing damage with his Q. And then also he's got hypermobility through the jungle using his E. I think there's some interesting potential. I want to see that get cracked. And that's all I'll say about it.
On the subject of mobility, the thing about Aurelion is that he's really, really, really slow. Like, he's seriously slow. He gains movement speed as he moves in a straight line without suddenly changing direction, which means if he's going to go in the jungle, he's going to go through the jungle really, really slow. And he can use his E to jump from one side to another, but then he has to spend a lot of time just walking to build up the stacks for the E again. Yep. And the same thing with his Q. Yeah, it's theoretically got infinite range, but in order to follow it at the right speed, you either need to use your E or you need to invest a lot of money in move speed. So it's like, the weakness of Aurelion is that, yeah, he's got great mobility over time if you have time to get him going, but if he needs to react to something quickly, he can't. Like, he literally just can't.
I mean, I guess he's.
But the interesting thing about that, sorry, I know I said I was only going to say one thing about it, but the interesting thing about that is I can see him having a jungle clear that is built around basically trying to drive by the camps rather than, you go to the camp and you stop and clear. To an extent, I think it's possible. Not on the buffs, but maybe on the walls. If he. Look, I don't know if it's going to be
run
possible.
Past the ranks and just one-shot them.
No, not so much that. Like, I haven't seen enough of him being played to know how possible this really is. But, like, in my wildest, most moistly erect dreams, this is the jungle Aurelion Sol.
Imagine him just, like, serenely floating by and, like, smite stealing, like, Baron or something. He's just like...
yeah. With his orbs.
It's gonna happen. Yeah, we're gonna see like the random
porn art of Aurelion Sol. By the way, like, it happened instantly. The furries were on it.
Is it good?
Some of it, not all of it.
I just to get back to the mobility thing, I think what's interesting is, like, he has a lot of I mean, I guess in some ways it's a bit like Twisted Fate, where he has a lot of movement across the map, but he's not particularly mobile in combat. Like, compared to someone like an Ari who can move quite quickly once they're in the team fight, he's got the ability to get to the bottom lane, like to basically wave clear, push to the tower while somebody's not there, and then immediately go to another lane to try and gank. So I think in competitive play, it will be interesting to see how he goes, because you've got people who are skilled enough to be able to move around, effectively move in the team fight, but also can make use of that movement across the map to put pressure and to do all sorts of different things. I guess the bigger difference between him and TF is, like, TF signals he is moving, but then it's instantaneous, and he has hard CC, which he can flash and use. Where Aurelion Sol is more like he can move very slowly across the map to get himself in a position, but he doesn't have any hard CC. So it's a different kind of mobility across the map compared to a Caster or a TF, or like the champions that you'll quite often see with those sort of heavy ganking mid laners.
It's similar to, and it'll bring it back to the jungling point, it's kind of similar to Zac, who has to sit back and, obviously he telegraphs his thing a lot. You can be a little bit more sneaky with Aurelion Sol coming in from the back line, but it's kind of similar in the jungle in that it's going to open up, if he does become a jungler, of course, it's going to open up really unique gank paths. It's going to be really hard to ward against, because, imagine going up to mid lane. You literally just have to go up the mid lane. You don't have to come through the river. You don't have to. I mean, you can go through the river, but it's just so easy to go up, almost like a scion channeling your star. You can also do that up to top lane or to bottom lane, and there are really easy paths to that are almost impossible to ward against. And I think that's going to bring an interesting dynamic if he does become a new jungler.
If he doesn't, do we think we're going to see him in the top lane or the mid lane?
Mid lane.
Yeah, mid lane.
Mid lane, yeah.
He doesn't.
He's too slow for the top lane if he gets caught out even once. Like, again, he's so slow. When anyone has time to do damage to him, he can't run away because the E gets cancelled the instant he takes damage. So that's not a get out of jail card either. He really has no escape from anyone who's chasing him. So up against anything, like even like a Jax would just jump on him and then he's gone. So
how funny is it going to be with people? Sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
I had no more to say. Just go ahead.
It'd be funny. Like,
what's going to be funny?
People like trying to sneak past Baron and have his passive trigger Baron, and then Baron just knocks him out of the sky. That'd be funny. I'm looking at that.
That's already been happening actually in the people trying to juggle him as they go past a camp and they aggro it by accident.
Yeah.
Like, fucking really.
You can do Gromp and blue buff at the same time with his passive. With W.
Rylai's is going to be super key on this guy, and I think there's no two ways about it. He's going to have to go for quite tanky builds, because a lot of his damage is actually about staying quite close to his enemies. Even at max orbit of his little planetoids, he's still really close to the enemy. He'll need a decent front line, and he needs to be fairly survivable as well. And then his Q doesn't have huge range either, and he wants to nurse it for as long as possible, which probably means getting close to the enemy. That's the only argument I think for putting him in top lane, because often you want a tankier top laner. But I would agree really that he's probably going to be a mid laner. Just wanted to see what the pack.
He has almost no burst as well, so like you need to build a tanky, because I mean presumably his Q will do damage, but it either they're going to make it, if you move with it, it does so much damage it's going to make him oppressive in laning phase, or he'll do not as much damage when he's poking with it, which I imagine will be the path they'll go down. Like, not much damage when you're just sort of poking it far from it. But it, he really needs to move with it. You really can't do that in team fights. He kind of looks like a bit like a Vel'Koz, where you really don't want people to get close. And yeah, his ultimate does knock people back, but I mean, you think about a Mundo, like a 4,000 hit point Mundo, you can knock him back once. He's really not going to be worried. He's going to be like, yeah, I'm coming for you pretty soon. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they're trying to balance his damage output versus his range and all the rest of that kind of. I mean, which is true of any mage, to be perfectly frank. Like, it's not exactly like they don't have these problems with other mages, but it'll be interesting to see how they try to balance the range at which he's effective, because he doesn't have the mobility to sort of duck out of the way, but he does too much. If you make it really heavily sustained, like, you get issues there. If you make it too much burst, you have issues there. It's a tricky needle to thread.
I'm in my mind, I'm sort of comparing him a little bit to Carthus, in that Karthus is the mage who deals constant sustained damage during a fight, and that's kind of what his passive is doing. It's dealing constant sustained damage, and not quite as good as Karthus. And like when you think of Karthus, it's like, okay, Karthus will probably pick up a Roa, maybe a Tear, so he gets the Seraph Shield and a Zonya's Hourglass. This dude can probably go for a similar build, but also Karthus has his death-defied bullshit, because you can still burst a Karthus and make him disappear pretty quick, but he's still going to be alive and shooting Qs at you for the next 5 seconds. Aurelion's not really doing anything like that, so, like, you're going to be moving around with this dude constantly in a fight, trying to hit these feeble, tiny little orb things, and at the same time trying not to get altered and two-shot by Zed.
Yeah. And I think, like, what was I going to say?
Good question.
So the difference between Karthus. So, Karthus also has a really significant amount of CC. Like, that slow on his wall is, devastating at max rank. And that
instant.
That amplifies his... Yeah, and it's instant. And it really amplifies his damage because, okay, you come at him, he's doing damage with his Defile, he's hitting you with Skittles, he then slows you, you're like, it's like an 80% slow, you're pretty much stationary, he's just still hammering you with the Skittles, you're still in his Defile range, you then kill him, he's still defiling you, he's still skilling you, and then he ults, so, he does a severe amount of damage in that radius, and his CC is key to that, where Aurelion Sol's got a knockback, and then, hey,
he's got a stun on his Q.
Yeah, is it a stun as well?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. So
I mean, the thing about Aurelion
things.
that I don't think people have talked about a lot is that he has a hell of a hard time freezing lane. Like, because I think the orbit of his stars is at vanilla is pretty much, it's very close to his auto attack range, so you have to be super careful not to accidentally last hit or damage enemy minions. And it's like, so keeping the lane like in a good position is going to be really hard, which is why I feel like we won't see him in competitive at least for a while.
Yeah, the big reason I feel like we won't see him in competitive is because he's got no siege tools and he's got no anti-siege tools. And it's not a hard siege meta, but 80% of competitive games have a point at which one team is either going to be sieging or defending from a siege. And he doesn't fit either of those things. There'll be the rare games where no team is particularly good at sieging, and there we might see Aurelion as a pick if he's a good counter. That being said, we don't know a whole heap about his scalings, and we don't know a whole heap about his damage as it is. I mean, we've seen a bit of him, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he gets better base stats than a lot of mages, especially we bring up Karthus as sort of a similar champion who is still comparatively quite squishy. He is about as squishy as a mage. I would imagine Aurelion Sol would need to have some better scaling purely because of how close he needs to be to deal damage. If he hasn't got that, his damage will need to be nuts, and it'll probably be shit to play against. I think there's still a lot to see with this champion, but my hunch is that he's going to be niche.
I imagine he's going to be pretty comparable to Diana as an AP bruiser. Yes, we're both talking at the same time, but I talk for longer,
and then we're done.
so I get to continue. He's gonna be pretty comparable to Diana in terms of like how you build it, how much damage output's going to happen, how sort of easy it is to focus. Obviously, like different in terms of how they actually play, but when you're thinking like, is this guy gonna have good, bad scaling? I think it's gonna have scaling that will be good, but you just can't build it because obviously, like if you build Glass Cannon Diana, you die. If you build Glass Cannon Aurelion Sol, you're going to die as well, because you do have to get into close range. So it's going to be things like Rod of Ages, Zonya's Hourglass, maybe the slowing one, Rylai's.
Yeah, I think Rylai's is going to be so key on him.
Yeah,
there's a few key items you want to build on.
Also, the Sonya's Hourglass, interestingly, his stars don't stop orbiting him when he's in Sonya's.
I wouldn't think
so. You can go into the middle of an enemy team, Sonya's, and if you have enough damage on your passive, you could actually get a significant amount of damage over time down. And I think it's also true of Guardian Angel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not something that he has to channel. It's not going to stop if you stun him. So it wouldn't stop if he crowd controls himself through Zonya's or dies through Guardian Angel.
The stars will disappear during stuns.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, stuns, silences makes his stars disappear and they come back.
Huh.
Okay, well that is interesting then.
Victor.
Anyway, these are all collective reasons why I'm more leaning towards an Aurelion Sol jungle than an Aurelion Sol solo lane. Oh,
fair enough. All right,
You got it out.
That's it.
and I need to go soon because my girlfriend's nagging the shit out of me.
Yeah, I was just about to say we're actually wrap it up because we've gone for an hour. So,
Yay!
yeah,
That's the intention.
that's the intention. Thank you, Skyen, for joining us. It's been excellent having you on. Anytime you want to come on and talk shit with Aussies and Kiwis, feel free to hit us up because it's been great having you on.
I will. It was
Shout
fun.
That's great. And shout out to Steve, who tried desperately hard to get into this call for like half an hour before he gave up.
Steve being
And
there.
apparently,
Sorry,
I am to
let's
say
let
good
Skyen
evening,
actually
ladies and
respond to
gentlemen.
Pixie, you suck!
Oh, he did it. Okay, that's
suck.
it. Show's over. See